Alright, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Before we begin the presentation, we would like to say thank you for the opportunity to be able to make a presentation in this international law course under the guidance of our lecturer, Ms. Rizky Dian Nursita. We will discuss the theme of transnational organized crimes, or TOC, based on the effectiveness of international law. Alright, let's just get into the material. First, what I will discuss is what is transnational organized crimes. Transnational organized crime, or TOC, groups are perpetuating associations of individuals who operate, wholly or in part, by illegal means and irrespective of geography. They constantly seek to obtain power, influence, and monetary gains. There is no single structure under which TOC groups function because they vary from hierarchies to clans, networks, and cells, and may evolve into other structures. These groups are typically insular and protect their activities through corruption, violence, international commerce, complex communication mechanism, and an organizational structure exploiting national boundaries. With few exceptions, TOC groups' primary goal is economic gain, and they will employ an array of lawful and illicit schemes to generate profit. Crimes such as drug trafficking, migrant smuggling, human trafficking, money laundering, firearms trafficking, illegal gambling, extortion, counterfeit goods, wildlife and cultural property smuggling, and cybercrime are keystones within TOC enterprises. The vast sums of money involved can compromise legitimate economies and have a direct impact of governments through the corruption of public officials. Then, who is the actor of TOC? TOC groups may encompass both the Eastern and Western hemispheres and include persons with ethnic or cultural ties of Europe, Africa, Asia, and the Middle East. These groups, however, are able to target victims and execute their schemes from anywhere in the world. Thus, the extent of their presence within a particular area does not necessarily reflect the degree of the threat they pose.
Who is the responsible agency for TOC? I would like to answer it. One of the institutions responsible for combating TOC action is the United Nations Convention Transnational Organized Crime. So it is a convention that regulates the setting of standards for national law in each of the participating countries, emphasizing the differences in the legal system of the participating countries and cooperation that can be fostered among participating countries regarding the eradication of transboundary organized crime. More than 120 countries participate in this convention. This convention is an effort for the international community to develop international instruments on transboundary organized crime. The participants of various countries in this convention reflect the fact that these countries recognize that transorganized crime is a problem for everyone and it requires international cooperation in its resolution. The purpose of the establishment of this convention is an international cooperation, where the provisions of this convention are intended to provide tools and agents in law enforcement as an effort to prevent and protect victims of organized crime. Actually, this has been regulated in the national law of each country, but there are several member countries that do not yet have regulation regarding these matters. In addition, if there are countries that already have arrangement in their national law, but it turns out that they have different requirements so that there are already settlement elements and some have not. This convention is used to regulate this.
Are international crime always transnational? Basically, there is no clear distinction between international crime and transnational crime. Nevertheless, difference can be identified under the classification of individual crimes. According to these measures, international crime is not always cross-border as long as it raises international unrest. Transnational crime, while it contains elements that concern two or more countries, transnational crime by legislation. The term transnational is used in the United Nations Convention Against Transnational Enforced Crime, which is found in the 2009 Bill of Ratifying the United Nations Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime. Chapter 3 offers to explain that for the purpose of verse 1 of this chapter, a felony is transnational if carried out in one more than one country, but the essential part of the preparatory planning, direction, or control activities take place in another country is carried out in one country, but involves an organized group of criminal engaged in criminal activity in more than one country or done in one country but has major consequence in another. Freely translate, transnational organized crime is the work of group involving two or more countries whose act constitute a crime. At least according to one country international crime, whereas the understanding of international crime can be seen in the description of Robert Cryer in the book An Introduction to International Criminal Law and Procedure, which explain that another and more substantive approach to determining the scope of international criminal law is to look at the values which are protected by international law prohibition. Under this approach, international crime are considered to be those which are of concern to the international community as a whole, a description which is not of great precision or edge which violate a fundamental interest protected by international law. When translated fairly, international crime is a crime that causes international community unrest or acts that violate the fundamental interests protected by international law.
Can transnational organized crimes disrupt the stability of the country? The answer is yes. Transnational organized crimes can certainly disrupt the stability of the country. Why? Because, as we all know, some examples of transnational organized crimes are illegal arms trade, narcotics trafficking, human trafficking, and even terror. These crimes can disrupt democracy, hinder free markets, deplete state assets, and prevent the development of stable societies. That is why transnational organized crimes can be said to threaten the security and stability of countries. Furthermore, international security is no longer about the security of the state, but also about the security of the people within it. Let's talk about human trafficking. Human trafficking is a definite threat to human security. Human trafficking doesn't directly affect the security of the country, but in the end, this problem directly has a negative impact on the sustainability of a country. Furthermore, human trafficking also means an outflow and inflow of people that aren't detected by the government. This illegal and untraceable movement of people has the potential to disrupt the society. This means that human trafficking is a form of threat to the social stability of society in a country, which, of course, can disrupt the stability of a country as well. The state is obliged to ensure the welfare of its citizens and is at the forefront of providing legal protection to the public from the crime of human trafficking. In addition, cooperation or diplomacy between countries can actually provide a solution to the human trafficking problem. Countries in the world have agreed to eradicate and even provide assistance to the victims. Currently, what the state does on average in assisting victims is to accommodate and then return or repatriate these trafficking victims with funds and costs by the recipient country. Especially for victims who then get into legal trouble, the country of origin is allowed to help its citizens get the justice they deserve.
What are examples of transnational organized crime cases? So as we know, transnational organized crime is organized crime that occur across national border and involve groups or network working in more than one country to plan and carry out illegal business. In order to achieve their goals, this criminal group uses systematic violence and corruption. The most common transnational organized crimes are money laundering, people smuggling, cyber crimes, trafficking people, drugs, or nuclear material. It is sufficient to understand what transnational organized crime is, and it seems most of us have heard of many cases like this happening. And one example of a case that had shocked Indonesia at that time was the Balinan incident. You must have heard of the Balinan case, or maybe someone else has followed the development of the case rather than Balinan itself. So the Balinan is the name given by the mass media to the 9 Australians who were arrested on April 17, 2005 in Bali, Indonesia, in an attempt to smuggle 8.2 kilograms of heroin from Indonesia to Australia. Two of the 9 drugs offenders, Andrew Chan and Muram Sukumaran, were sentenced to death, while 7 other drug convicts were sentenced to life imprisonment. And at the time, various diplomatic efforts were carried out by Australians to be able to ease the death penalty received by the 2 suspects in the dual Balinan case. Australian responses did not only come from the Australian government, the Australian community also responded to the death penalty policy in Indonesia, which ensnared Australian citizens. So, what is the solution to the Balinan case itself? As we know, the Balinan is the case that falls into the category of transnational crime, and its resolution required direct intervention from the 2 parties concerned, namely Indonesia and Australia, because the 9 members of the dual Balinan who managed to smuggle heroin out of Indonesia. Several diplomatic efforts have been attempted by Australia to Indonesia. Australia uses soft diplomacy, in which Australia approached head of state over prisoner exchange and asked the United Nations for help to stop the death penalty and grant pardons to death row convicts. Then there is Australian hard diplomacy, such as diplomacy through the mass media or aid diplomacy, by leveraging the Aceh tsunami aid and financial assistance from Australia for Indonesia. By leveraging the assistance that Australia has given to Indonesia, Australia hopes that Indonesia can ease the death penalty for their citizens. And the Australian government has also threatened to boycott one of Indonesia's most beautiful tourism destinations, namely Bali. And some Australians support the statement by Australian Prime Minister Julia Bishop threatening to boycott Bali, but there are also those who don't agree with this statement. And finally, Australian diplomacy tried the mass media or aid diplomacy by provoking the international community not to support the death penalty policy in Indonesia. It just that the diplomacy effort carried by Indonesia. It is that the diplomacy effort carried by the Australian government didn't produce results, which caused both of their citizens to be exhausted. And what are the factors causing the failure? For the internal factor is different understanding of human rights regarding the death penalty in Australia and Indonesia. The Australian government system is built on the tradition of liberal democracy based on the values of religion tolerance, freedom of speech and association, and the rules of law. Australian institutions and government practices reflect the British and North American models. And for the external factor, utilization of the role of the Australian mass media as a tool to support the government in an effort to constrict Indonesian government policies. The existence of mass media is used as a tool to promote certain image or view in the form of public opinion in the case of Balinan duo.